Come back. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. His body locked up as the voice continued, its tone pleading. Come back. You let me out. You have to finish it. Click. The call ended. Daniel dropped his phone like it had burned him. His pulse thundered in his ears. He turned to Noah, who was already sitting up, wide-eyed. Who was that? Noah asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Daniel swallowed hard, rubbing his face. It was the house. The house is hungry. Against every rational thought in his head, Daniel knew what he had to do. The whispers, the knocking, the thing inside the walls, they had all been warning him, begging him. For what? For him to finish what he started. He had opened the door, and something had come out. If he didn't stop it, more people would disappear. So as the sun rose, Daniel and Noah got back in the car. They drove toward the house in silence, dread pooling in their stomachs. The moment Daniel stepped onto the property, he felt it. A heaviness in the air. A presence. Something waiting. The front door was unlocked. It shouldn't have been. He had locked it before leaving. And yet, as he pushed it open, he swore he heard something whisper. Not from the walls, not from the hidden door, but from the very house itself. Welcome back. Daniel clenched his fists. If this thing thought he was just another victim, it was wrong. He wasn't here to be hunted. He was here to end it. The house loomed before Daniel, its presence heavier than it had ever felt. The air was thick, charged with something unseen, yet suffocating. Noah stood beside him, his hesitation clear. You don't have to go in, Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. Noah swallowed hard but shook his head. If you're going back in there, I'm not letting you do it alone. Daniel nodded, appreciating the solidarity even as dread curled in his stomach. The front door was still unlocked, slightly ajar as if inviting them in. Daniel pushed it open. The house was silent. Too silent. The air inside was colder than it should have been. It smelled of dust, mold, and something rotting. Every instinct screamed at Daniel to turn around, to run and never look back. But he had unfinished business. He had let something out, and he had to put it back. The house remembers. The floorboards groaned under their weight as they stepped inside. Dust hung in the air, disturbed only by their movement. Then, from deep within the house, a knock. Daniel froze. Another knock, louder this time, then scraping. Long, deliberate drags of something sharp against wood. Noah tensed. That's coming from the hidden door, Daniel finished. They both turned toward the hallway, where the jagged hole in the wall remained. The opening was black as pitch, as though it had swallowed the very light from the room. Daniel's pulse pounded. He took a step forward, then another. A whisper slithered through the air. Closer. Noah sucked in a breath. Did you hear? Before he could finish, the whisper turned into laughter, low, distant at first, then rising, overlapping, until it filled the entire house. Daniel's flashlight flickered. The shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting along the walls. The air felt thick, pressing in on them. Then, suddenly, thump. Something slammed against the hidden door from the inside, hard enough to rattle the walls. Noah took a step back. Nope, number absolutely not. Daniel ignored him. His feet carried him forward on their own. Something inside the house wanted him to open it again, but Daniel wasn't that stupid. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something he had prepared earlier, a container of salt. If this thing was connected to Thatcher's rituals, maybe breaking the seal of the house had let it loose, but that also meant it could be bound again. Without hesitation, Daniel poured a line of salt across the opening. The reaction was instantaneous. The house screamed. Not in any way Daniel had ever heard before. It was a high-pitched, shrieking wail, inhuman, agonized. The walls shook, the lights flashed, and from inside the hidden space, Something thrashed violently against the unseen barrier. Noah cursed, gripping Daniel's arm. "What the hell did you just do?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted, his voice shaking, "but I think it's pissed." The basement calls. The screaming stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Silence. Daniel held his breath, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Then, from deep within the house came another sound. A door creaking open. Noah turned, his face pale. That came from the basement. Daniel's stomach twisted. He had never been in the basement. In fact, he hadn't even thought about it until now. But as the heavy, oppressive silence filled the house once more, he realized something chilling. The house had been leading him here. The knocking, the whispers, the hidden door, it had all been a distraction. The real horror was waiting below. Noah grabbed his wrist. "We are not going down there." But Daniel knew better. If they didn't end this now, the thing in the house would keep feeding, and eventually, someone else would move in. So, gripping his flashlight with a death grip, he turned toward the basement door, now standing wide open, and stepped forward. The stairs creaked under his weight as he descended, the air growing colder with each step. Noah hesitated, then muttered a curse and followed. The basement smelled wrong, damp, earthy, but beneath that, something metallic. Then Daniel's flashlight flickered. The beam danced across the unfinished concrete floor, landing on something carved into the ground. A circle. Intricate symbols surrounded it, worn but still visible. At the center of the circle was something that made Daniel's blood turn to ice. A trapdoor. The chamber beneath Daniel stepped closer, heart hammering against his ribs. Noah let out a shaky breath. "You're not seriously thinking about opening that, are you?" Daniel didn't answer. He knelt, brushing away the dust covering the symbols. They weren't random, they were seals, protective wards meant to keep something trapped inside. His stomach churned. The knocking, the scratching, the whispers, they hadn't been coming from the hidden door in the wall. They had been coming from under the house. Before Noah could protest, Daniel grabbed the rusted handle of the trapdoor and pulled. The wood groaned, resisting at first. Then, with a final, sickening pop, it gave way. A rush of cold air blasted upward, and beneath them was a tunnel. It stretched into darkness, the walls lined with old, rotting wooden beams. The air reeked of decay, of something long buried. Noah took a step back. "Daniel, do not go down there." Daniel swallowed hard. The whisper came again. "Come, see." And this time, it didn't come from the walls. It came from below, from the tunnel. Something was waiting, and now the way was open. The tunnel yawned beneath them, a black maw stretching into the unknown. The air that rushed up from its depths was damp and wrong, thick with the scent of earth, decay, and something else, something rotting. Noah was breathing too fast, his eyes darting from the tunnel to Daniel. "Tell me you're not going down there, please." Daniel wanted to agree. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to seal the trapdoor, pour salt over it, and run. But the whisper had come from down there. The thing that had been in the walls, that had stalked him at night, it hadn't just been trapped in that secret space. It had been buried beneath the house. And somehow, when Daniel had opened that first hidden door, he had begun undoing whatever had kept it down here for so long. He had to end this. "Stay up here," Daniel said. "Like hell I'm staying up here alone," Noah hissed. "You saw what happened when you poured that salt. This house is alive. It's pissed, and it does not want us here." Daniel ignored him. He turned his flashlight toward the tunnel and climbed down. His boots hit solid dirt, and the temperature dropped immediately. His breath curled in the freezing air. The tunnel stretched forward, impossibly long, as though it had been waiting for someone to enter it again. The forgotten ones Noah followed, grumbling under his breath. The tunnel was narrow, the walls lined with rotting wooden beams, some of them splintered, as though something had tried to claw its way out. Daniel moved forward cautiously. The ground beneath his feet felt loose, as though it had been disturbed recently. And then, his flashlight flickered, the dim beam landing on something ahead. Daniel's breath caught. The tunnel opened into a small chamber, and inside, scattered across the dirt floor, bones, not just one set, many. Daniel crouched, his fingers hesitantly brushing against one. It was small, human. Noah sucked in a breath. "Oh my God, those are people," Daniel whispered. "People who lived here before." The realization sent a cold spike of fear through him. All the missing tenants, the woman in 2008, the family in 2017. They hadn't disappeared. They had been taken. Noah suddenly grabbed Daniel's shoulder. "We need to go, now." But before Daniel could respond, a breath stirred the dust behind them. Then came the scratching, slow, deliberate, right behind them. Daniel turned. His flashlight landed on something at the entrance of the tunnel. Something that had been crawling toward them. It froze when the light hit it, its head twitching unnaturally to one side. Daniel's blood turned to ice. It was pale, its body impossibly thin, its skin stretched too tight over its frame. Its arms were too long, its fingers tipped with jagged nails, crusted in something dark. And its face was wrong. Where eyes should have been were only hollow sockets, black and empty. And its mouth, it grinned at them, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. "You let me out," it rasped. Then it lunged. Nowhere to run. Daniel barely reacted in time. He shoved Noah backward, dodging as the thing clawed at him. Its movement was erratic, its limbs bending at unnatural angles. Noah scrambled to his feet. "What the hell is that?" Daniel didn't have time to answer. The thing rushed forward again, impossibly fast. Its bones cracked as it twisted through the tunnel, moving wrong, like it had once been human, but had forgotten how to be. Daniel grabbed a handful of salt from his pocket and threw it. The creature shrieked as the salt hit its flesh, its body smoking where the granules landed. It recoiled, its grin twisting into something far more sinister. Daniel grabbed Noah. "Run!" They bolted through the tunnel, their boots kicking up dirt. The thing shrieked, then charged after them, its claws scraping against the wooden beams, its breath rasping in the darkness. The exit was so close. Then the floor gave out beneath them. The buried truth. Daniel hit the ground hard, his lungs emptying in a painful gasp. The world spun as dust rose around him. He could hear Noah groaning beside him. They had fallen into another chamber. The thing was above them now, clinging to the edge of the broken tunnel, staring down with those hollow sockets. Then, for the first time, Daniel heard another sound. A voice, weak, desperate. "Help! Me!" Daniel's stomach dropped. He turned his flashlight and nearly screamed. A woman was in the chamber with them, or what was left of her. Her clothes were tattered, her skin sunken. Her arms were bound in rusted chains, the metal digging into her raw skin. Her eyes locked onto his, pleading. "Please," she whispered. "Don't let it take me again." Daniel felt sick. This wasn't just a haunting. It wasn't just an evil presence lurking in the house. This thing had been feeding, taking people, keeping them. Noah stumbled forward, his voice hoarse. "Who are you?" She tried to speak, but then the creature above them shrieked, and it dropped into the chamber, ending the nightmare. Daniel moved on pure instinct. He grabbed Noah and yanked him back, then threw another handful of salt directly at the thing's face. It howled, its flesh blackening where the salt touched. The woman sobbed. "It can't be killed. You have to bind it." Daniel's heart pounded. "How?" "The circle," she gasped. "Trap it back in the circle. The symbols on the floor. They hadn't been random carvings. They had been a prison." Daniel grabbed the salt and ran, dragging the line of granules across the chamber floor, completing the broken symbols. The thing screeched as the last line sealed shut. The air shuddered. The creature convulsed, its limbs twitching as if something was pulling it down. Its grin faded, and for the first time, it looked almost afraid. Then, with a horrifying shriek, it was yanked downward, the earth itself swallowing it. And just like that, it was gone. Aftermath, Daniel and Noah pulled the woman out of the chamber, barely alive. By the time they emerged from the basement, the house was silent. The air was lighter. The weight of something ancient and hungry finally lifted. The woman, Sarah Harper, was identified as a tenant who had gone missing 10 years ago. She had been trapped down there, tormented, barely alive. But she had survived. Daniel didn't stay in the house after that. Neither did anyone else. By the next week, it was condemned. Some places aren't just haunted. Some places are cursed. And some things should never be let out. The end.